Hello, welcome back to the Borth podcast. I am excited today because I have a dear friend of mine on, and we're going to talk about your journey through infinite banking, your journey through um, just this whole idea of infinite banking, and just kind of get to know you a little bit better. And I love sharing these ideas. So today I have Shala Ree, I believe, but we all call her Shala Lamboy. So thank you for taking the time and to spend with us today, Shala.
Wade, I'm totally excited to be here because one, you're my friend and also one of my mentors in infinite banking. So it is a true honor to come and spend time with you today.
Well, thank you again. I know it's time out of your schedule, so I just always appreciate that. So I look forward to this conversation because I love when my listeners get to hear your journey, right? So I've had other people on, and the stories that can be told by everybody are so unique and so amazing, and that's why I always kind of get a feel that everybody thinks, well, I can't do this because you're what you're doing, and you've been doing it for they're talking about me for 15, 18 years. They think, well, that's not doable. But everybody has a story. Everybody has a starting spot. And we're going to touch on that a little bit today as we go along. So, and I just want people to understand that are listening that Shala works for Factum Financial. She is a wealth strategist. You can find her at factumfinancial.com. Look up her bio. She is, I call it the Shala Fun Bus. Shala has fun no matter what she does. She's a fabulous person to be around. So thank you to you again. And let's get into this a little bit. So first, let's tell anybody that's listening to the podcast, tell me a little bit about Shala. Give me the
Yeah.
story.
I'm going to go back to when I was a kid for a split second. When I was a kid, I loved money. In junior high, if you remember back in junior high, well, I had friends that were running for student body president and vice president. Not me. I wanted to be treasurer. And I was sixth, seventh, eighth, all through junior high, part of high school. I like counting money, organizing money, understanding money, holding the money. Nowadays, as an adult, we still, in my house, we throw it in the air and dance with it. Um, I know. That's probably not surprising.
The Shala Fun Bus, right here, people. This is what I'm talking
There you
about.
go. There's a video actually of a group of women. I was just at a retreat, and we all have a video online that's going right now that we threw the money in the air, and we're having a really good time for a reel we're making. So I
Okay,
really,
well, hold, stop there. Where do I see that video? Because I have not seen that video.
oh
So
gosh.
I want you to tell me where that video's at.
My friend Ashley Takis posted it. I will have to find it and send it to you. Okay.
Oh, we'll put it in the show notes then. So,
Okay, that's fine. That's perfect.
so
So I really have always been curious about money, and then as a early or late teens, early 20s, I actually worked in my parents' office, and they were extremely successful entrepreneurs at that time. And so I had a unique experience. I was invited to go to, I just remember it was this exquisite boardroom, the number one CPA and tax lawyer in La Jolla, California at that time. And I just remember this executive boardroom. I really knew I was out of my element at that moment, but it was the comfiest, cushiest brown leather chair that I sank into. And I was like, this is heaven. Um, so I realized really early on in life, I never wanted to be the smartest person in the room because there's so much value in getting around folks that think and talk about big ideas and are really think about growth and expansion ideas,
mhm.
which I know you agree with that.
Yeah, that's the abundant mindset that everybody listens to me and listens to my podcast and knows anything about me. They know that's the whole idea is that we want abundance in all those 5 different areas in our life, and you're the one that you exemplify that wholeheartedly. You look for abundance everywhere you go. So, so for all the listeners that don't know Shala and hopefully get to know her really well, she is a very abundant mindset. So I'll let you go on, but I just want to throw that plug in for that thought process that you're really good at.
Absolutely. And the second thing that I learned in that boardroom is that the wealthy think differently about money.
Mm.
Now, the idea of infinite banking, I don't think had even come from Nelson Nash at that point. It hadn't been codified. Um, so that didn't exist, but the wealthy really do think differently about money. And so what is Nelson Nash's, favorite saying, his number one rule?
Rethink your thinking.
Rethink your thinking. So I learned that early on. And so when I heard it from Nelson, that clicked really quick. I love being a mom. I'm a mom of 3 kids. This year I am celebrating my 30th wedding anniversary to my sweetheart, my high school sweetheart. Yep.
Wow.
So it's a big celebration year. We have lots of abundance in the personal circle or the personal area of life. A couple years ago, I had my three kids all flew the coop, so we're empty nesters. And
Mm,
I read this recently. I know your son. How old is your son?
17.
17. Really close.
Junior. Yeah.
Really close. I read this on Facebook, and it said, "I'm not an empty nester. I'm a bird launcher."
Love it.
Yes,
That's a positive mindset right there.
teaching them to soar on their own. So,
So,
yeah, I love being a mom. We went wholeheartedly into being parenting. My husband Dennis was the PTA president for a while. I was all into PTA. I was an art docent and ran the art program and taught at our schools.
wow.
Like we just went all in. And I think in life, if you want to really be successful, especially in the family circle, and the same with all other areas in life, you just have to be present.
Yeah. This is a participation game. It's not an observation game. I
Part-
think so. I think we have to participate as much as possible in all the things we can do, right? So if we're dealing with our money, again, go back to those 5 areas we talked about. You have to participate in your finances. You have to participate in your in your spiritual life. You have to participate in your marriage, right? It's interesting because COVID kind of brought where we found people that weren't participating in their marriage, and it was like, oh my gosh, we got to spend time with our spouse. Holy smokes! But it's like anything else. You have to participate and you have to fully engage. So I love that idea.
Yeah, I haven't heard that said before. Participation game. Wade, I really
Yeah,
like how you said that
yeah, yeah. It's not a spectator sport. Life has got to be a participation game.
for sure.
So.
Love it. So yeah, recently I started with the Rotary, and their slogan is creating hope or create hope. And I just
Mm.
thought that was the best thing because that is really what someone brought into my life was hope when I was introduced to becoming your own banker and infinite banking.
So tell me more. Tell me why. Why were you open to that idea? Because I think that's probably where a lot of people get caught. It's like, why were you open to that idea? Because sometimes I can introduce this to somebody and they're like, whatever. And other people are like, that's exactly what I'm looking for. So maybe tell us a little bit about the why.
Well, I'm going to tell you a story to explain that one. So, my son Justice, he's now 19, but when he was 4 years old, he and his dad were, I don't know, guys do this. They're always on the floor wrestling every night. And so he was in jujitsu at that time. And so they were down on the floor grappling. And my husband is sitting on his knees, eye level with Justice. And Justice goes, Dad, close your eyes. And that kid, he's a riot, but he literally just took his tiny little fist and popped my husband right in the face. Now, luckily, he wasn't that strong at that time, and we all had a good laugh. But I'll tell you what, my husband didn't fall for the, dad, close your eyes trick again.
Mm-hmm.
But in the financial world, I feel like we get just popped in the face quite a bit in the typical financial world. I feel like pop Shala, you lost 30% of your money in the market. And that has happened a couple times. I didn't learn as fast as my husband did with the kid fist.
You
Where
mean you don't like the trust me it's going to come back?
Yeah, that's a boom. Oh, don't worry, you're young. It will come back up. Well, that just never sat well with me. And so the third time we went through that financial pow, it was right around 2008, 2009. And if you lived through that, you were right there with me.
Yeah.
And
And,
got
and
thoughts on that?
no, I'm just like, yeah, there's a lot of people that can relate to the 2008, again, it was opportunities and it was chaos all at the same time. It just depends on who had the money.
Ex- that is such a good point. It's who had the money. And so that is really going to be the point of our conversation today. Um, at that point, I just knew there was a better way than letting someone else control my cash, let someone else control my money and what really was my future. And so in that moment, God, the universe, I was just ready to listen. And I believe when we're ready to listen, the right things shows up.
Yeah. Well, 100%. When we're open, Nelson used to use this conversation all the time. He would say, because I would always thank him. I said, when he was alive, and him and I have a lot of conversations. I go, Nelson, I just want to thank you for teaching me and being my mentor. He says, nothing I did. He goes, this is what Nelson would say. He said, I cast seed on the ground. you were the ground that received it. You were fertile. You accepted it. You watered it. You grew it. He said it's all you, and it's all God. That was kind of his approach. He was such a humble man. But it's so true is that there's a lot of seed that's cast on barren ground that's never going to grow. You were just open and willing to nurture that idea. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you.
So
I think we are gifted many times by the people around us, and then, like you said, the ground has to be fertile. And at that moment, it was for me, and I am so forever grateful. I discovered at that moment, it was kind of a journey, right? IBC is not an instant thing. It's a journey. You learn about it, you hear about it. It's a new way of thinking, a mindset. And what
mm-hmm.
I discovered was the only guaranteed asset of its kind that the wealthiest companies and families are using quietly.
They have no reason to share it, right?
Nope. And and more importantly, how they were using it so that my family could do the same thing at
Yeah.
our level. And most people have heard of Robert Kiyosaki, right?
Yep.
Rich Dad Poor Dad, and he always says,
Cash Flow Quadrants, one of my favorite books by.
"Yes, yes." He's got a couple. One the second. There's a good one I read that was the second. I can't remember. I'll have to think about that one. I can't remember the title. He's got a host of good books. He says, "The rich buy assets and the poor buy liabilities."
Mm. Yeah,
Yep.
100%.
Yep. And so, coupled with my early life experiences in that boardroom in La Jolla and being around wealth and tax strategists working for my parents, I was in this place where I was totally ready. And I was like, whoa, this is good stuff. So, early on, I'm going to tell you kind of like how this came about and why infinite banking actually hit home with us. Early on, when my kids were really young, and I think you've heard my travel stories. I'm a huge travel fan.
I love your travel stories, by the way. So I was going to get to that. I mean, because this is your abundance in your family life, but it's also ties into how do you incorporate. It's one idea. It's one thing to have a strategy, but now it's like implementation. So now this is your implementation strategy. Is how I see it in this story. So I don't mean to interrupt you, but for the listener, I want you to understand that there's the idea, but then it's like, okay, there's a ton of ideas on the internet, but then how do we implement this? What's the next step? And Shala, I think you're a great example of what's that next step. How do we implement this, and how do we make it part of our lives?
Okay, so this it was really a good point, Wade, because when I learned infinite banking, I learned it from a dear friend who had just learned it himself. And so he didn't have, it was literally, said, buy this book. I ordered it off the internet and he drew some, stuff on a piece of paper and he walked out. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And I ordered the book and he flew back to Texas and I didn't talk to him for 6 months. So I got started on this journey and I was kind of a soul, I don't know what bird flies by itself, a
Right.
soul chicken walking around, in the yard by myself going, does anybody know what's happening here or how to actually use this? I had a policy, but I didn't really have any guidance. And so that speaks to how important and how valuable it is to be with the group here at Factum that, oh my gosh, we have systems and trainings and like 14 hours of a resource video library on how to actually utilize this great asset so it benefits your life rather than just owning it and sitting there.
100%. And part of, and here's a shout out to you. And I don't know if this will be published by the time you get up and do it, but it'll be recorded on the Factum website. But Shala, you're going to be doing a deep dive, which is like an hour long, 45-minute long conversation about one specific part of just the IBC journey. And that's a little bit what you're talking about today. But I just want people, if you have a chance, if you want to hear more about Shala a little bit deeper, go to factumfinancial.com, go to the resources page, and look for the header that says deep dive. And there'll be a recording of that available for you to see a little bit. Again, right now we're snorkeling into your life. This is going to be a little bit more scuba diving into that conversation.
I love your analogies, Wade. They're the best.
So anyhow, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
This is great. Early on, before IBC, okay, my kids were really young. I remember sitting on our cobalt blue couch, right? That's going to date this a little bit.
Yep.
Blue couches don't exist anymore. And my daughter, I think she
No,
was
should they?
I love that blue couch. It was so vibrant. she was sitting on the couch reading Junie B. Jones, and my husband and I were watching Rick Steves' Europe on PBS, the public television channel. And on this episode, because we watched him all the time, every week before, there was DVRs and all that, he was hiking the Cinque Terre. Now, if you're familiar with Italy, the Cinque Terre is 5 beautiful, colorful seaside towns right on the coast of Italy. One is up in the hillside. And in this hillside town, it's kind of secluded and apart, and there's families that have lived there for like 200 years making wine. Like
Wow.
it's just so dreamy. And so between these towns, there's a hiking trail. And so my husband and I are sitting there and we looked at each other, and at the same time, we're like, bucket list. We're going there, we're doing that. And maybe, Wade, your listeners are a little like me. We wanted to go on this vacation. Like we knew we were going to go, but it always seemed that there was this choice between what a lot of people say YOLO, you only live once, right?
Right.
Or some people say FOMO, fear of missing out. There's this choice of I want to live life to the fullest, and on the opposite spectrum, I need to be a responsible adult and say, think about the future.
Yeah.
And it feels like there's this constant choice, this battle that I was in with how to utilize my money and live abundantly in all the areas of life that I wanted.
Yeah.
And it just seemed, honestly, it never seemed like there was a good time or a good way to access our money so that we could, go on this vacation and go to Europe without taking away from our financial goals and our long-term wealth building. We were doing all the right things. Our dollars were inside investment properties where we couldn't get them without a refinance. They were in retirement accounts that we couldn't access for 30 years. Like we were doing great things. I always say we felt asset rich, but cash poor.
Yep.
And like this goes back to your earlier conversation. This is about who has the cash.
Right.
So
Yeah, I'm just going to make that point is I've had that conversation a lot of times. I got a lot of farmers around here and they're all about owning the asset. I said, the problem with an asset is if you want to buy a loaf of bread, what do? Take a bucket full of dirt in and say, here, I want to exchange this. Cash flow is what develops that financial freedom that you need. The ability to have cash coming in your pocket so you can go do what you want to do.
Absolutely. So some of my wealth building choices have realigned over the years as we talk about the abundance in the 5 circles, the 5 areas, so that I think we talk a lot about here at Vacuum having your wealth building choices match your values in life. So that has really changed a lot of what I do. But what was really missing, we're going back to that access to cash, regardless of what our investments were doing, we were missing an intentional and strategic savings that would complement everything. Oh, excuse me, everything else we were already doing in life. So I'm going to say that again because I choked on myself there.
It's such a powerful subject you brought up. You're choking yourself up.
I know.
You got verklempt, right? That's the.
I was so excited I couldn't speak. What was really missing, regardless of all the other things we were doing with our investments, the thing that was missing was an intentional and strategic saving strategy to complement and enhance everything we were doing already.
Yeah. Perfect. Well said. Intentional and strategic. One of the things we talk about all the time, right? You got to be intentional about. One of our mentors, Steve Chitter, he always said you don't drift to a desired location. You have to have an intentional purpose, right? And that's the idea that if we don't have intentionality behind what we're doing, then we may or may not hit our goals because we don't really have any goals, right? So it's hard to put effort into something if you don't have some intentionality. I'll just use one of my stories since it's my podcast. I'll use one of my stories. I was having a conversation with Josh, our son, and he likes to fish, and so I use this same conversation. I'll say, that fishing spot that we want to go to, it said, if we just put the boat in the water and the wind's blowing, it said we may or may not get there. So sometime in life we have to put the motor in the water and go. But that's intentionality. That I think that's missing in a lot of people's plans. Like, what's my intention on this? What's my long-term, short-term goal? How does this help me find the freedom that I'm looking for. What's that freedom and that ability to make my own choices, right? So I think if they have the intentionality, that will lead to that freedom that they're looking for.
Yep,
So
absolutely. Love that.
so
Put the motor in the water.
but you got to put the motor in the water, exactly. So so I didn't mean to interrupt your story. You were going somewhere. So with that idea that now I like, we got to tell this part of the story too, because this is the part I really like with your European trip story. You guys planned it out, right?
We
Tell that
did.
story. Yeah.
Yeah, we did. So we even when we found IBC and infinite banking and becoming your own banker and started actually keeping our money in a very strategic location so that we could live life in full abundance. We I wasn't even going to talk about this, but I love that you brought this up. We were very intentional about how we traveled with kids. So if you plan to travel with children, this was before the day of iPads. There was nothing for them to watch on the plane ride to Europe. You reach out to me, I'll give you all sorts of fun stuff. But our children were at the age that they could read Magic Tree House books. Um, there was a couple of different books in that age group, and they studied for themselves. Everybody picked a place. One of the kids read about Pompeii in a book at their level. One of the kids read about the Colosseum, and then they made a poster with all the things that they learned. One of them learned about just wherever we were going. We went to the pyramids. Somebody talked about the pyramids and mummies and how mummies were made and the significance there. And so when we saw mummies and we saw the pyramids, they were like, oh, it wasn't just dragging kids through monuments. They actually had a connection because like you said, we were so intentional beforehand. They still remember it. Our youngest was 6 at the time, and they all still have such great memories about that first vacation.
Yeah. And I think there's a fabulous lesson there just for people in general, right? So the idea that, people can't expect what they've never experienced. And
Mm.
so, what you did with your children, I think, purposefully was you had them experience something in a book, read about it, understand it, study a little bit. So when they got there, they had a little bit of expectations about what that might be. And so I think that's such a powerful story. How you engage your children and have them, find value, like, hey, they're part of the planning process. And so we haven't excluded them. But B, for everybody in general, right? Start learning, start to get educated. And then when you come to have a high level conversation with somebody like you, Shala, or me, or whoever it might be, that expert that you need in your circle, now they have some expectations of what they want to get out of it versus just going in there blindly, right? So instead of, close my eyes, hey, Dad, close your eyes type of thing, you're coming in with your eyes wide open.
Exactly. There's two kind of people in the world, Wade. I really believe that. There's people like you said there that maybe they don't learn about something first. They just kind of hear it and go, "Oh, that's nice." And then there's another kind of person who is very intentional, inquisitive, ready to learn, naturally open minded to seeing what's really out there and what's working. And these are the people that I really work with, that I
Yeah.
like to work with. A lot of people think outside the box and are open. Like you said, they'll come in. They've already owned Becoming Your Own Banker book. They've already read it. They're like, wow, what else do I need to know about this? Because this is mind blowing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's 100%. It's like, people, again, I find tremendous value if you're going to be one of my clients, Shala, you've read the book, if you've done some sort of study, you watch videos, right? So at factumfinancial.com, there's, like you said, there's 14 hours worth of video that they can get. If you want to reach out to Shala, she can give you a link. She can give you a link to some additional resources that aren't on that website either. Speaking of which, if somebody wants to talk with you, somebody wants to reach out to you, um, how do they contact you? What's your email address?
My It's a long one. It's my
No.
name, which will
Yeah.
be in this note, Shalare, Shalree at factumfinancial.com.
Okay.
We'll put that
Um,
in the show notes or something.
yeah. Where else? Are you on Facebook? What are you doing for any kind of social media where they can go? I want to learn more about this fun bus.
I am on Facebook. I am on Instagram. The best place to learn more about this, and which you can then instantly, it'll say, hey, make an appointment, send an email, is what we call the Beat the Banks page. So we're having a great conversation, Wade, and there's a lot of storytelling, but some people like numbers
Yeah.
and some people like to actually see, behind the scenes how it actually works. And so that's what this Beat the Banks page is for. And my website is the banks dot life life /freedom.
Freedom. Love
Freedom.
it.
Beat the
So,
banks dot life /freedom. And we'll put that in the show notes too, if that's okay with you.
yeah, I sure will throw that in there because, like I said, if people are listening to this, a lot of times we have to raise our hand and say, "Hey, I'm not the expert," because I'm not the expert in a lot of things. Quite frankly, Shaw, I'm not an expert in tax. I'm not an expert in property and casualty insurance. I'm so part of what we teach at Factum, and that we have a conversation around is this idea of putting together this team, having a well scorecard, and having the right people serving you at the highest level on all areas. We know our lane. We understand what our lane is, which is strategic savings, in the right environment, right? And having those conversations, how to put it to work, and having a debt strategy. Those are things that we have in our lane. So I guess the point I was making is like if you have to have if you want to have a conversation, not you have to have. If you want to have a conversation, and what Shala is saying, it resonates with you, reach out to her because she is so full of abundance. She'll teach and have these conversations with anybody because she's so excited about this idea. Any other big ahas in your kind of your family, what do I call it, family journey through IBC?
Sure. So before I go on with that, I'm just going to point out I am kind of, what would you call a quiet, I look at people's stuff online and I don't comment or don't like, like, let me see what's really there. So if people aren't ready to reach out, but this really intrigues them, that's really what the Beat the Banks page is for, because I'm not going to come after you. You can just listen until you want to know more, and I'm never going to beg. Like, that's what it's for. People that are like, I'm not ready for an appointment, but what is this?
Right. Yeah. It's some people are going to watch from afar. Some people are going to get it right away. But whatever situation the listener is in, we're ready for that. We're having conversations all the time. If you can't tell through the energy of this call, this conversation, this podcast, we love what we do.
Yeah.
This is exciting to us. This gets our blood pumping because this helping people take control of that financial, of the financing in the world, right? The banking process in their world, and finding that freedom, quite frankly, that they're looking for. That's really what the ultimate key is like, let's find the financial freedom that you're looking for, which leads to really all the freedom and all the abundance that we want. If we can unlock that and stop giving that control to somebody else, stop giving it to your broker, stop giving it to your banker. But also with that comes responsibility, right? Because we want to take control. We should want to take control. We should be in charge of our own lives, right? I heard a good friend of ours, David, who's been on this podcast before. He says you have to be your own director. You have to be the director in your own movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is so true. But it does take some work. Again, it goes back to the intentionality. Your kids had to do some research. They had to do some reading. They had to draw maps. They had to put together posters. But how much more engaged were they when they got there?
100%. The important thing is all that engagement and planning actually made the journey so much more fun. In fact, I have found, and I don't know if you found this too, but I think having something planned, the anticipation of something, going somewhere, doing something, is almost as fun as doing the actual thing.
Mm-hmm. Can be. Yeah. It is because it especially if you have a creative mind. I shouldn't say creative mind. If you can imagine anything, it's like, hey, this is so much fun creating this. What's it going to be like when we actually get there? Again, it goes back to that. Now they're starting to experience it and then when they do get there, it's going to be that much better. And
Yeah.
that's same thing with this whole idea of, getting educated, because it's really yours. Because you, Shala, you and I are kind of the same way. I don't want to be a gatekeeper to anybody's finances. I want to empower people to take control of their finances because I know I'll be called to heaven eventually. Whenever that is, whenever it's God's plan, I'll be called to heaven. And when that happens, if I'm your gatekeeper, then now it kind of leaves you in a position where you're not in control, right? So we want to empower people to take control of their own finances, their own future. And it's just my job to, help take the weeds out, but it's your garden to grow.
Yep, and that leads me next into my next point. My big aha was this idea of empowerment, and that has such far-reaching ripples. And the thing is, we just don't save enough. Americans don't save enough,
Mm.
and why do you think that is?
Um, I think there's a couple of reasons why that is. Well, part of it is we're conditioned to think that we need to spend all our money, right? Or the
True.
other part is that we don't have, again, the information's there, but we don't have a strategy, and we don't have a place that makes our money feel like it's important.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. So I used to think that it was an income problem, and if you go to the Beat the Banks page, you'll actually see the numbers behind that, and I don't think that anymore. I don't believe that one for 1 minute.
No.
So the question then becomes, well, why don't we save? Well, think about it. What is the first gift that, well, I don't know if that's true still, but back in my era, my generation, the first gift every baby got from a toddler, like from Aunt Kathy or grandma, was a little pink piggy bank,
Yeah.
right? We were taught to save. You put your quarters in, ding, 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 or you fold up your dollar bill and squeeze it through the slot when you're a little older. And those older piggy banks, you had to actually get a hammer to
Break.
crack that thing open. And then, of course, they got smarter because parents didn't like glass on the floor, so they put the little plug at the bottom, the rubber plug, so you can shake that thing and get the coins out. But I believe exactly what you said. The reason we are such low savers is the environment that we have been conditioned to save in. It
Yeah.
is boring as heck.
Yeah. And the other side of that thought process is that they have the front part, right? We need to save, right? That's the whole idea. This goes back to our entertainer on the radio all the time, right? Save, saves. 100%. We need to save. But the next part is, I think, the part that Nelson gets right is that if you're conditioned to believe that we have to save, save, save to buy a car, and then we're told now we consume, that's a consumer mentality. Where in all reality, Nelson in his book, he says, hey, save, save, save. That's exactly the right thing to do on the front end. But now don't consume. Think like the bank thinks.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Deploy your capital with an expectation that capital, that money, will be coming back with interest. That's the part that's never really been taught.
That is totally true. So I'm going to share a story that uh, I was just at Disneyland. So I'm in San Diego, and Disneyland is well, it's a common denominator in our life. So, and if you've been to Disneyland lately, that is a true major financial decision.
Yes, it
But
is. It's been a lot of years, but it was a financial decision 15 years ago when we were there. So,
yeah. So we were at Disneyland a few weeks ago with a friend, and I noticed that every area has a fountain. So this is how you know I'm a true infinite banker, because all I thought about all day in each new ride I went to was infinite banking, and this is my thought. Toontown has this beautiful fountain. If you haven't been to Toontown, there's a new ride, fantastic. Uh, it's Minnie holding a watering can. And then you go to Pirates of the Caribbean, and there's, the themed fountain there up against the wall. And in the tiki room, there's this beautiful, huge pineapple fountain. And so all I could think of all day was that how efficient a fountain is at recapturing water. Because I know you have another podcast called Money is Like Water. And it's very, very true. How many flows in our lives makes a huge difference in the abundance we're able to live. So I imagined standing in the line at Pirates. This is what went through my mind. I was imagining, what if there was a hole in the bottom of this fountain? Literally, there would just be water spewing out on the floor, being lost forever. And if you imagine, I've got a fountain in my backyard. If you imagine standing with a hose to fill that fountain, right? And there's a hole in the bottom. Well, the water is just running down the concrete away from you. Like you're not really making progress.
right.
And if you turn it off, well, guess what? You have to start over again to fill the fountain because nothing stuck around.
Mm.
And that's a lot of effort, and it takes a long time. And this is how most of us spend money.
It's how we treat money, right? Isn't it
Yeah.
how we treat our money? A good friend of mine would say, I heard him say this a long time ago, 15, 20 years ago. He always said that there's more money to be made by stopping the leaks in your bucket than by making more money. Is that a good one?
That is a good one. Yeah. And so that's what we really do at Factum. We stop the leaks. And
Yeah.
the truth is, we finance everything we buy. I mean, this is the foundational idea behind Nelson Nash's teachings. We
Yeah.
finance everything we buy. What does that mean, Wade?
Well, for me, what that means is that we finance everything we buy because we don't have enough savings to begin with. And so when we don't have enough savings, we have to go to the, like Nelson calls them, the snakes and the dragons, the Wells Fargo of this world, right? So we have to go to the Wells Fargo because we don't save enough. But the bigger part of that picture is like, no matter, even if you pay cash for stuff, if you save stuff up and you consume your money, that's a form of financing. And most people don't get that part of it, right? They don't get the fact that if I consume my money to buy a car, what's my plan to replenish that? Because I've spent it. And again, this goes back to a previous podcast. I know you've heard it as well, is that you have to love yourself and your family more than you love Wells Fargo. Because if it was Wells Fargo money, you would pay them back with principal and interest. But when you use your own money, what do most people do? I may pay it back, I may not. I don't have a plan for it. I'm not intentional, right? I'm not intentional with my dollars. The business of Wells Fargo, the business of banking is very intentional about getting you to pay back systematically and as often as possible, as quick as possible. That's
Yep.
what the business does. And so the question is, why aren't we acting like that in our own lives?
Yeah, it's an idea that it's pretty easy to see that money is flowing away from you when you borrow it, to buy something, right? You
Right.
borrow money for a car or a vacation or a mortgage, right? It's very easy to see that you are paying interest and principal to somebody else. But I was a pay cash person, so when I first heard this, I thought, "Oh, this really may not work for me. It's not for me because I don't pay interest." But what I really didn't realize and was the huge aha for me at that time was every time I spend cash, I am giving up the use of that money forevermore. And that is a huge cost. And that is the problem infinite banking actually solves.
Yeah. That is the huge address because that's the sneaky one. Nobody sees that because it's not there to be seen, right?
Hmm.
It's not there to be seen. It's like your money dies. And once money dies, it's never to be seen again. So it leaves your environment. It leaves that water fountain.
Yep, it's like that water just rolling down the sidewalk, gone forever,
Yeah.
away from your economy. The water still exists, right? It's in the ocean, it's somewhere,
It's
but
a Wells
you
Fargo's pants bank, right?
yeah, the Wells Fargo fountain. But I
Yeah.
want it back in my own fountain, so it is recycling, recapturing, and recoming back to my family. Recoming. I don't know if that's a word.
Yeah.
Uh,
It is today.
yeah, recapturing it back to my family economy. Otherwise, that money has left my earning potential forever.
Yep. And then this is the beauty of it. Once you've started this, it's like something I use this analogy as like if you talk to a person that's been blind all their life, how do you describe what the blue sky looks like? How do you describe blue?
Mm.
It's hard. It's almost impossible, right? Because they have no context. But once people get into this, and again, this goes back to that quote I was saying that people cannot expect what they've never experienced.
Mhm.
And so, but once they get into this, once they start educating this is where I see this idea will blow up. I mean, not blow up literally in their brain, but it'll just blossom in their brain. It'll just like take hold of them, and then they're going to find regret. Like, oh my gosh, I wish I'd have known this years ago. How many times have you heard that? And then they're like, oh man, think of all the money I wasted. I hear that all the time too. And I'm like, hey, I would agree with you, but we can't change the past. All we can do is change now and going forward. So
Yep.
take action today would be my suggestion to anybody that's listening to this. Get educated. Start planning. Start being intentional about your money and your process. And this idea of banking will go on in your life if you choose to take control of it or not. If you don't choose, if you choose to ignore it, the banks will be really happy with you. Wells Fargo will love you.
That's right.
If you choose to embrace this idea that we finance everything we do, and we're in two businesses. Nelson always said, what you do to make your living on a daily basis, and you're the banking business. And this is absolutely true because everybody needs money. If you think about Robert Kiyosaki, the cash flow quadrants, right? There's all the quadrants require access to capital, access to money. The
Mhm.
people on the right side, which eventually everybody wants to get to, that's what Robert will say. You want to be a business owner or an investor, all require money. The question is, are you controlling that part of it? Are you in that business of banking? The answer is yes, you are. But the bigger part of that is again, how much have you given away? How much are you willing to pay for a Wells Fargo to be part of it?
I'm going to take this back to, oh, I just lost my thought. Oh, that we don't save enough. I know that we talk about these all the time at Factum, but the number of days of liquidity that the average business or family has. I just looked it up last night, 25 days in San Diego. So if there's a family or a business in San Diego and they go 25 days without income, 25 days without a customer at their doors, right?
Right.
They're closing shop.
That's crazy.
And how crazy is it to think that you can build a business for 10 or 15 years and lose it all because of one recession, one unknown circumstance, one pandemic. We saw this a couple of years ago across the country. And that's just such an not an empowering place to be, to think that you've worked your whole life to create abundance and it can be wiped out because why? You didn't have access to cash, and that's totally solvable.
Totally solvable. But it takes time, it takes money, and it takes commitment,
Intention. It takes intention, right?
intention. Yeah.
And that's why we're having this conversation because, like I said, there's two types of people. There's people that hear it and go, "Oh, that's nice. Yeah, that's a good idea, and that might work. That might be a good idea to start saving some more and putting it in a more efficient place that's more strategic and gives me, so much more freedom." Or and then there's the other person that is like, "Oh my gosh, I need to know more about this." Right? This would absolutely impact my life in all the best ways.
Yeah. 100% agree. So, man, this is so exciting, Shala. So a couple of things as we wrap this up and as we get ready to go. Thank you. Well, thank you for taking the time. But what I'm asking two questions. What would be your parting piece of advice, and what is the last book you've read that you really love?
Oh, wow. The last book I read. Gosh, you're gonna catch me off guard. I am. Oh, you know what? I am reading. I'm reading two books right now. We just read as a team. We read the One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan, I think is his name.
Yeah.
We read that every year. That's an excellent book just to focus your mind on like what is the most important thing to be intentional about. Um, and then the other thing I'm reading is by Alex Hermosi, 100 Million Leads. That guy is just such a kick in the pants. I really enjoy his writing. I enjoy everything about him. If you're in any kind of sales, marketing, service, and your purpose is to serve people in the world, to help good people have good things and live life more abundantly, that is a fun book.
So, what was that last one?
It's called 100 Million Leads, LEADS.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Really how to serve people
At a higher level.
at a higher level, more
Yeah,
powerfully at a higher level. That's right.
exactly. So, all right. What's your one piece of advice for the listener tonight? Today,
Woo! One piece of advice.
your secret sauce. What's your
Create a
special
life you
formula?
love.
What's
Yeah,
your special?
create a life you love. That's my thing. Create a life that you love. If you don't love everything about your life, there's something missing. And I found that by learning the infinite banking process and incorporating some of the ideas that we have here at Factum, living a life of abundance, being intentional, really creating a family banking system that the money keeps coming back to you over and over, and you're able to build relationships and pass on values to the people you love most.
Oh,
It's just a good place to be.
yeah. That is so fabulous. I appreciate that. The idea of notice we didn't say passing on money. I love the fact that you said passing on ideas because ideas will live. Money can go. I mean, even though it can be very intentional, but it can come and go. But ideas, and I don't know if it was Gary Vanderchuck or somebody would say, drop me in the city with no money and I'll be a millionaire in 3 days because he has the right ideas. He has the right thought process. And that's really all we're talking about. Infinite banking isn't a product. Quite frankly, it's a thought process. It's how we overcome the human emotions and human nature,
Mhm.
and then how we think about money. Those are the two things that infinite banking is. It's not eventually you have to use the right tool, but it's that tool comes at the end. It's what's between your ears that's the most important thing. So,
Just like I learned back in that boardroom at 19 and 20 years old. It's
and what was that again, real quick? It's
how
how
you
people.
think. Wealthy people think differently about money.
Yep. Wealthy people think differently about money. So if you want to be wealthy, if you want in your mind to consider you wealthy, then I would say start down that journey, start thinking a little bit differently and take some action. So Shala, you're the best. I appreciate your time. I love being on the Shala Fun Bus. Every time we get on the phone together, this is the excitement that we bring and the energy we bring. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Wade. This was a blast. I just totally love spending time with you, and thanks for the great conversation.
You bet. Talk to you soon.